Hello everyone. Thank you very much for coming to our talk. So I'm doing a Q&A with Mafalda here, into these amazing works behind. And shall we just go for it? Yes. Okay, fine. So my first question for you is, how does your work relate to the exhibition theme of reclaiming your power?
I think all my work in general is about reclaiming power, especially because I see the creative process as reclaiming power, because we don't have power over anything that happens around us in the world. We're basically completely powerless. You know, this is, I think, telling a story through your own perspective is a way to position yourself in something that you cannot control. The only thing you can control is the way you react to it, and this is the way I react to it. You know, I make paintings. That's why I think, they're always about reclaiming power and taking back control.
Yeah. Like this one behind us here, and she's kind of painting her own
reality,
her own existence.
Yeah, exactly. She's basically painting the floor under her feet.
Right.
You know, it's like I painted this when I was feeling quite, it was really difficult to go to the studio. I had a second job, like most artists do all the time, and I just felt like I was bending myself backwards to be able to keep a consistent studio practice and at the same time, have money to eat. Yeah. And this is what I wanted to represent here, like a really uncomfortable body position. She has shackles, she can't really move out of that position, but she can hold a brush and paint the floor under her feet.
Right. So your work often features yourself, and what draws you to self-portraiture?
Well, first of all, I'm the easiest model to use because I'm always available and I know exactly what I want the character to look like. Yeah. So I'm very easy to direct, always available, and also my work is really autobiographical. So even when I use other models, I feel like they work a bit like actors playing the role, and the role is me. So it doesn't really matter if they look exactly like me or if they look like someone else because they are me.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're conveying your own emotions,
Yeah, exactly. So having my face, sometimes they look like me more than others. It's funny, my mom yesterday, she asked me if this was me in that painting. And I was like, yes, I did use myself as a reference, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if it looks exactly like me. But it's funny to be in the studio and sort of look at lots of different paintings that are all me, but they all look different. It's it's all these other sides of me. Yeah. Lots of different Mafaldas that are all the same Mafalda.
Yeah. It's interesting. So your characters defiantly stare out at the viewer. Why do you do
that? It's really important for me to think about the way we are observed by others and what that changes inside us. Basically, I feel like we can be many different characters depending on who's looking at us and how, and the context, what's happening around us. And when someone looks at you, and I mean that changes something inside of you. So when you look out, again, it's a way to take a position, to take a stand and not be just vulnerable, you may be interrupted doing something. These characters are definitely, in my imagination, they're interrupted doing something, and then they look out in the painting, they look out of the situation they're in, this dream world or whatever imaginary world, and they confront the observer because they are vulnerable, but they are not passive. They're taking an active stand of like looking out, and that's again a way of regaining power over their own narrative.
I feel like as well, when someone looks at you and you're doing something, you look up and catch someone's eye, you're almost pulling them into that story with you. Like, whatever you're doing, like they're suddenly involved in that as well. And I feel like your characters especially, like they're pulling you in. So it's almost like it's that real play with like voyeurism and like the observer and the observed, and like how you just suddenly come together. It can just be like a quick little catching someone's eye, but you're just suddenly pulled into their life, their story.
Exactly, and I was actually thinking about that the other day. I didn't think about that before, it was only when I was thinking about these questions you were going to ask me. I think they're also a little bit like, You know how we all have our child inside of us? I think they're also like children a little bit. You know, like that at the same time they're defiant and a little bit angry. When people look at them, they're also pulling their look, you know, sort of like calling someone's attention, calling the observer's attention, but at the same time not rejecting it, but kind of like questioning it.
Right.
You know.
I like that. And then
Yeah.
I've got this kind of childlike, playful.
Yeah.
Because I guess their poses are quite playful.
Yeah, they're kind of dark and also playful at the same time.
Yeah.
I always try to have a little bit of a sense of humor in the paintings. I don't want them to be too serious. You know, they have like these bright colors, but then at the same time they have the characters have this like really stern look, like what is happening there. It's kind of like there's this contrast between, you know, like the darkness and the like playfulness of the colors.
Yeah. Great. So there's a sense of intimacy and voyeurism in your works. And what do you hope your work says to the viewer?
I hope everyone kind of comes up with their own stories behind the work. You know, I don't try to direct people's attention to anything specific, and I also don't think about other people when I'm producing these works. It's the process of making them is basically only serving me in that moment. So I think once I'm done with them, I just remove myself from them completely, and it's like they don't belong to me anymore.
Right.
So now they're images for other people to make content about. I hope they still feel something. That's also what I always hope to feel when I look at another piece of work, like feel something physically, you know, some sort of connection. But yeah, I don't want to direct anyone in that sense.
Yeah, so you have freedom as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, set them free. You know, like they're my children, but I'm setting you free into the world.
Yeah, live their own lives.
Yeah, exactly. In a way, they're kind of dead once they're done. For me, just for me, not for other people, because they will have another existence for other people.
Yeah. So the moon is a reoccurring motif in your paintings and drawings. What draws you to that?
So the moon, I started painting the moon. Well, it wasn't actually a moon when I started painting it. It could be a sun or it could be a moon. I wasn't sure. And I think when I started making that, it's when I first moved to Berlin, so when I became an immigrant. And I think I wanted to feel connected to other people in other places in the world, you know, specifically, you know, my family. And I think having something in the sky that could be a moon or a sun was something that made me feel connected, because it's everywhere. You can always see it. Well, actually today you can't see it, but it's there. You know it's there. You can look up to the sky, and anyone can look up to the sky anywhere. So it definitely made me feel connected. And then later I realized, I think it is a moon, and I do feel especially connected to the moon. Maybe because I grew up Catholic, and I realized at some point that I didn't identify with the rituals, and it's just not, it's not how I see the world. But I think it left a feeling in me that there's something bigger than us. And you know, it can be for me it's more like nature, or it could be the universe, you can call it anything. But looking up to something, looking up to the moon sometimes, I end up feeling really connected to myself, and also, you know, I have this feeling that I used to have when I was a kid, when I asked God for stuff.
Right.
You know, I kind of like asked the moon to help me. Not in the same way as I did when I was a kid. I would just be like, God, make this happen. Now I'm like, moon, give me strength to be able to do this, or to be able to make this happen for myself. You know, and I know this may be real or unreal, it doesn't matter. It's just a way for me to like connect with myself, and like just, turn the moon into that sort of like divine entity for me.
Yeah, and I think like the moon is like, you know, obviously like controller of the tide, you know, like, you know, it has this kind of feminine energy, and you know, it's obviously really relevant to your practice because all of your characters are female. So you know, I think that it's really interesting that you chose the moon to like put in that corner. You know, and kind of, but no, for me, like, you know, it says a lot about like the feminine, and you know, this kind of controller that's just there.
Actually, that reminds me, there is something else I just realized recently about the moon. I think the moon is also in the paintings. I think it's there as a sort of a character as well. It's a passive character, sort of like a passive observer, and I do feel like there's lots of little fragments of my identity in these paintings. That's kind of what I try to do, like sometimes not completely consciously, most of the times I realize that later. But I think the moon is sort of there as myself, as a like external observer of my own experience, if that makes sense. I think that's something, maybe that's something that happens because I'm quite an anxious person, and whoever deals with anxiety knows that sometimes you have this feeling that you're looking at yourself from outside of your body. And I think that's what the moon is in my paintings.
Okay. It's really interesting that you say that you do these things and then you realise later, like the meaning. Is it quite like intuitive, your practice? Do you have sketches and work from that, or do you just kind of go through it on a canvas and just see what happens?
It depends. I never just go for it. Well, so I usually have a pretty clear idea of what I want to paint before I paint it. Sometimes that idea is just in my mind. Other times it comes from a sketch, not a sketch I made for like the purpose of being a sketch, but something I just like drew because I wanted to make a drawing. And then sometimes that turns into a painting. Or other times it's just from the idea I have in my mind.
And so is there like there's some leeway where you kind of have that intuitiveness to be like, I'm just going to add this in?
Definitely. I think paintings or any like creative expression kind of talks back to you. It's a conversation, right? Like I may have a pretty clear idea of what I want the painting to look like, but it's never going to look like that. You know, accidents are going to happen. You're going to have to fix them or to accept them. So there's like always this process of like give and take, you know, like with the material.
So you have an incredibly bold use of colour. How do you make your palette choices?
That's also pretty intuitive, right? Yeah, that one's pretty intuitive. I'm always trying to express a feeling or emotion. So I think the colors I pick are always sort of in that direction. Sometimes they're referenced in other paintings I made in the past, or sometimes I'm inspired by the weirdest things. Sometimes I'm just walking up the street and there's like dustbin, like just leaning against a brick wall, and I'm like, wow, that green with that brick color, wow, and I can't stop thinking about it. I'm just thinking about it for like weeks, and then one day I'm working on this painting, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to use those colors. They make sense here. They make sense for this story. You know, it could be anything. But so up until recently, most of my paintings were just completely different from each other. There was never a very consistent color palette in that sense. It was like every time I was starting a new painting, I would just come up with completely different colors. But recently I started working with a series, and that was not on purpose. I never had the intention of working with a series, but it kind of made this choice of colors a little bit more consistent, because I'm working a lot with the image of fire and sort of this like really classical thing, you know, like light and shadow. So there's lots of blues and lots of yellows and orange and red and magentas, you know, and that makes it a little bit more consistent. But I'm sure it's going to change again at some point.
Do you think that you're quite like restless in your colour choices? Kind of sticking to a set colour. You know, you say it's a series. Do you think like, you know, do you have like an endpoint to the series?
I never know when it's going to end. I mean, it's also the first time I'm working on a series, so I don't know. I will see when that happens. But I do feel like even inside this series that's around the images of fire, as I said, from one painting to the other, I see the colors changing already. Even in the same, I mean, if someone else comes in the studio, they see like it makes total sense and everything, but sometimes I look at one painting I'm working now and the painting I worked before, and I'm like, who was that person that made the other one? Like, how did it come from this to that? I was trying to do the same thing on this painting, but now it looks different, because the material sort of like talked back to me and it just, you know, asked for another attitude or something. You know? it's kind of crazy and very intuitive.
Yeah, and how long have you been working on the series so far?
This one since like October last year or something like that.
Okay,
Maybe
not
like
that
6
long.
months, no, yeah.
And already you're like, who's that person in October?
Yeah, exactly. There were so many different people.
That's true, yeah. So who or what are your greatest influences?
That's a good question, actually, especially after I said there are so many different people, because there's always a difficult question. I never know exactly how to answer it, because my biggest motivation to make work is just like intense navel gazing. But there's this painter that I got to know quite recently called Charlotte Solomon. She died in the Holocaust. She was very young. Basically, everything horrible that could have happened to her. It's a very sad story. But while she was running away from the Nazis, she produced a series of paintings on paper. They're figurative and they're quite autobiographical. And basically, she also wrote next to she painted these things and she created these characters, and she also created fake names for characters that were like real people in her life. And then she also wrote these stories on the side. And in the end, before she was taken away, she compilated them all and made a book called Life or Theater. Yeah, and this title really influenced me in the way I think. It's like, I felt like she was sort of putting into words a thought I had in the back of my mind for such a long time, or maybe forever. And it has to do with this thing I was talking about before, with this, I think life is a performance in a way. It doesn't mean it's fake. It just means, to me, that we are, as people, we are made of lots of different characters at the same time. And we sort of like switch between roles without even realizing it. Most of us don't realize it.
Yeah.
I like to observe this in myself a lot because I'm, quite obsessively observing myself all the time, and maybe that's why I make art. But I also see it in other people, and I think it's especially obvious in like people you know very well.
Yeah.
Because people change completely depending on where they are, who they're with, what they're doing. Their voice changes, their body language changes. The way I'm acting right now is not the same way I was acting like 5 minutes ago. Well, not 5 minutes, but before we started this. Like we're just lots of different characters inside the same vessel, sort of.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like even just going into like the very like basics of that, like when someone gets an official phone call, they do their phone voice,
Yeah, exactly. Their phone
everyone does that.
Talking to your mom voice.
Yeah.
There's so many. Also,
suddenly stop swearing.
Exactly. And also when you're an immigrant, which is my case, I realized that if you speak different languages, you have different pitch for different languages.
Really?
It's crazy. I don't do it on purpose. It just happens.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I've seen it in other people as well. It's not just like my thing.
So your paintings tend to be large and dominant. Tell me about your use of scale.
Hi. So again, my use of scale I think is very intuitive, and I sort of I think about it as if I am a camera.
Right.
Maybe it's this connection to like performance and the idea of like theater that makes me like think about myself as a camera. Like now that I'm thinking about it, but I'm always just focused on how close I want to get to the scene or how far away, and how many elements of the scene I want to look at. What is the focus on the composition? What's the most important part of the composition? Like if there is no point in having a body, then I will not include a body.
Right.
But I will also not make a painting smaller just to use a smaller size. I think the size is there to serve a purpose, to serve the purpose of a focus, like a camera.
Yeah, because it is, even this exhibition we've got
Yeah.
smaller one here, this really large one, and then we've got kind of medium-sized one over
Yeah.
It's interesting because like a lot of artists will only work on a large
On the
scale.
scale,
I think we've
yeah.
spoken about it before,
Yeah.
and they try to work on a small scale, but they just
They
can't
try to
do
do the
that
same
same
thing.
energy. It's just interesting that you are able to, like you said, like just hone in on it, but you've still got that same amount of energy.
It's a focus thing. Also, when I work on paper, for example, and I work like on a small piece of paper, like A4 paper, let's say, which is not a typical size for me, especially in like paintings on canvas, then I sort of turn everything a little bit more expressive and less detailed.
Right.
Because I don't want to fake this language in a smaller scale. I just want to, I don't know, I want to like react to the scale in a natural way. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So natural elements seem to feature often in your work. So here we've got like really crude raindrops, soft waves, and there's like spring and blooms, most recently fire. And then coupled with the nudity of your characters, it gives a sense that we, as in humans, are at one with nature but different. Is this something that you're interested in portraying?
Yeah, it's that's very important for me.
Yeah.
I think I was talking to someone about it yesterday. I just feel much more centered when I'm in nature.
Yeah.
I think living in the city, and I always lived in cities, is just so, it kind of takes you away from yourself. You know, like there's so many distractions, so many people running to places, so little awareness of everything that's happening, because there's just so much. And whenever I take myself out of that situation and I go into nature, or, you know, even just, as I said before, looking up to the sky, or going to a beach and listening to the waves, and going to a forest and like listening to the winds touching the leaves and the tree on the trees, you know, like that makes me feel like I am in the present. I'm not in the past and I'm not in the future, I'm just in the present. And that's exactly the world I want to portray in my paintings. I don't want to portray this world that makes me feel uncomfortable. I am creating a world because it's where I want to be in that moment. It's inside my head, and I escape to this world because I need it. You know, this makes me
grounding, isn't it?
Yeah.
So do you see your characters as being in control of their situation?
I do.
Yeah. You're co-curating?
Yeah, co-creating with my friend and artist, Manu.
Amazing. No arguments.
No arguments. We do have like different visions for things, and it's been difficult sometimes to like make decisions on just really simple stuff like a flyer. You know, because we do have different visions, and we are very different people.
Yeah.
But I think in the end, we know that these things are not important enough to like make us like fall out. You know, this is
as an artist, you know, you're so used to working by yourself and
Yeah.
following your own vision. So I think it's really interesting, like, you know, when artists collaborate and especially like co-creating a show, it's just a whole new experience, isn't it? That you have to learn how to deal with it. But it's good
and how to manage your ego also, because you don't have to do that when you're working on your own in the studio. It's all ego. But when you're working with someone else, you have to take yourself a little bit away from that and be like, okay, I'm not alone. This is not just about me. It's not about me at all, actually. You know, and that's a great exercise, like for life and for work.
Yeah. So, any questions from anyone?
No pressure. She totally felt the pressure.
Yeah, what's the relationship with the background? You probably said before, you know, the nature, but like in terms of like colors, and you know, when you actually do paint, what's the relationship between the strong colors of the background and actually those figures that which are more colorless and don't have many sort of details in the body itself?
Yeah. That's a good question. So basically, I actually feel like the human figures, I usually take longer to make them, and I'm quite like precise. Well, not this one I'm staring at. You can't see it, but this is a bit older. But I think in the present moment, I'm usually like quite precise with the human figures, and they usually have quite like thin layers of paint on them. I want them to be like flatter, and I also like to use this contrast between like different areas of the painting. Like in some areas there's a lot of paint and it's almost like sculptural, and in other areas it's very flat. And recently I also started working with you know, shinier areas and then more opaque areas, drier, oilier, and I think that gives it a lot more information, more like interest. And also I like to use sort of like different languages. You know, as I was saying, like more detail on the bodies, on the figures, and then the background is where I have fun. You know, where I have the most fun. I just do something a bit more abstract, or I use more paint, or it's more gestural, and that's kind of where I lose myself, and it's like this meditative experience. I don't have to think anymore. It's just like I can do whatever. This is where I free myself.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking about, you know, your paintings and how, I guess it's like therapy, you know what I mean? So like, you know, you were saying earlier that you're like angry, you know, like by the time obviously doing your painting takes quite a long time to, you know, so obviously over that period I'm guessing that you work out whatever problem you started with.
Yeah, definitely. It's a way to process like everything that happens on my like daily life, basically. Yeah, this thing of saying like art is like therapy always sounds so bad. Everyone always thinks it sounds so bad, but it's not. It's not, and it's basically what most of us do, you know, because this is the way we process and interpret the world around us. So of course it's a little bit therapeutical, unless you're really not looking deep enough. You know, like.
But do you remember, like, when you look at the image, does it conjure up what you were feeling at the time you wanted to do, or do you think you just forget? I mean, when you're looking at a series, you're like, I was feeling like that with that.
Yeah. So that's, I do remember. I remember exactly what it was I was feeling or thinking, but I don't feel it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, like when I'm painting these things, I feel these things in my body, and then once I put them in the canvas, I feel like maybe it's a matter of time. Maybe I had enough time to process it. I put it on the canvas, and then I don't have to carry it inside of me anymore.
It's kind of there.
Yeah.
It's in the canvas.
Yeah.
Like Dorian Gray.
Same.
Lovely, alright. Well, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming.